I am a performance physical therapist. My name is Mike Reinhardt, as you just said. I've had the pleasure of working with an array of youth, collegiate, and professional athletes, as well as a combination of tactical athletes, weekend warriors, and civilian service members. Now, let me start with a bit of a disclaimer about myself. I am a self-described nerdy meathead. I fell in love with strength and conditioning as a high schooler who knew absolutely nothing about what constituted good training. I can assure you I've made every imaginable mistake in the book, from performing the same workouts on consecutive days, to pushing to failure with every training session, as well as holding this belief that I needed to leave the gym like I just clawed my way through a near-death experience. I'm sure many of you can relate to that, right? So I like to think that I've learned, that I've matured, and that I've refined my understanding of what constitutes good training and performance through the blending of my formal academic education, as well as my lived experience as a coach, as a clinician, and as an athlete myself. So I want to start this talk by discussing and better defining two ubiquitous terms that we're all faced with every day. These are the concepts of health and performance, right? It's the title of the section I'm speaking, health and performance. So my first question, what does health mean to you? What constitutes good health in your mind? Secondly, what is performance? What constitutes good performance? And lastly, do health and performance run along the same vein? Or put another way, is good health synonymous with good performance and vice versa? Or is there actually a competition for resources that must be distributed amongst the two? Now, the odds are that your personal definition of what makes for good health and performance is different than my own. And this is perfectly acceptable, right? We all come from different backgrounds. We have different motivations. We have different aspirations. But there's a likelihood that we all have similar there's a likelihood that we all need to embrace the fact that we have to apologies. Let me say again. 6 by 4. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. So let me start this by offering my definition of what health means to me. Health is a functional, a physiological, a psychological, and a spiritual state of being that allows an individual to pursue meaningful activities without perceived or actual limitations in their ability to do so. Now, obviously, health is highly dependent on the individual. As I said, your definition will vary from mine. However, there are a handful of commonalities that can be seen amongst those that fit that definition. Generally healthy individuals often share a zest for life, and they do not feel limited in their ability to take on challenges and adapt seamlessly in the face of obstacles that life tends to throw our way. In my perspective, health equates to a body and mind that is malleable and highly responsive in the face of changing circumstances. Those that are generally healthier often recover from injuries faster, with less future limitations. They often view significant life changes through the lens of optimism and growth, as opposed to pessimism and fear. They often have more robust immune systems, which allow them to overcome ailments with minimal downtime. Health implies having access to a larger buffer against the unexpected and the unavoidable. So when we discuss our own health, most metrics that seek to define health do so at a population level. It's very difficult to define health at the individual level because most statistics rely on population-level statistics, like the absence or presence of a diagnosable disease, or physical impairments that might limit someone's ability to, say, walk, or negotiate stairs, or to live independently. So I want to give you a handful of metrics that we can utilize when assessing our own health. So we can look at things like resting heart rate. We can look at blood pressure. We can look at heart rate variability. And we can even look at heart rate recovery following exercise. Now, I'm sure many of you are already familiar with these terms, but let me give you a little background about what these things mean. So resting heart rate, what does it mean to us? Our resting heart rate gives us an indication of how efficient our heart is at pumping blood throughout our body. If we have a lower resting heart rate, oftentimes we're pumping more blood with each beat of the heart. From a blood pressure standpoint, this tells us how much pressure our heart has to create to pump blood throughout our body. Lower resting blood pressure means our heart does not have to contract as forcefully. When we talk about things like heart rate variability, or HRV, what we're really doing is describing the difference between individual beats of the heart. Now, this can be useful, just as we discussed with breathing, because a low heart rate variability is often associated with more of a sympathetic state of the autonomic nervous system. High heart rate variability is often associated with more of this parasympathetic or rest and digest and recovery state. So it's important that we can kind of have a way to analyze this. And lastly, heart rate recovery following exertion is useful because it tells us how long does it take the body to return back to its resting state after intense exertion. So in general, low resting heart rate, well-regulated blood pressure, and fast heart rate recovery are often indicators of good cardiovascular health. Now, when we discuss performance, performance is something that I think comes naturally to this crowd, right? I don't need to tell you what performance is. But metrics of performance are often easily defined because they're specific to a quantifiable and reproducible measure, right? So performance could take the realm of running a sub-3-hour marathon, or deadlifting 500 pounds, or performing the CrossFit workout Grace in under 3 minutes. Each of these outcomes is easily retestable and scalable. So oftentimes it's easy to select these benchmarks, but as many of us know, the path to achieving these milestones is not so simple. This is because performance, just as the case with health, is influenced by a number of factors, both internal and external. Now, let me be clear. There is nothing wrong with performance-driven aspirations. Quite the contrary. I'm an Olympic-style weightlifter who consistently exposes my body to highly strenuous, repetitive, and often uncomfortable training sessions. I've learned to embrace this process, and I like pushing my body beyond what I previously thought possible. But I do not make the mistake of doing so under the guise of becoming healthier. Pursuing any activity at the outer edges of our physical capabilities mandates that we assume a substantial degree of risk. We must accept the fact that we are placing ourselves in a position of intense demands with an unknowable threshold of self-destruction. We do not know how much is too far until we've already crossed this theoretical boundary. Alternatively, we will never know our true potential unless we push beyond the point that our brain pleads for us to cease and desist. Peak performance is a beautiful balancing act on a razor's edge, tiptoeing the line between accomplishing the impossible and tumbling perilously into an injurious crevasse. Now, don't get me wrong, good health can improve performance, but improving one's performance does not directly correlate to improved metrics of health. This is a case of diminishing returns. Too much of a good thing will eventually reach a crossroads in which more of the same results in the detriment of something else. So clearly, there exists a highly dynamic interplay between health and performance. Too much emphasis on health or performance will invariably take something away from the other. We cannot expect to achieve elite-level performance without assuming some degree of risk to our health. Alternatively, we cannot expect that establishing daily habits will translate to elite-level performance. This is the foundational economic principle of opportunity cost applies here as well. The more we devote ourselves to a singular pursuit, whether it be putting our money in a specific investment or devoting our time in the gym to developing a specific capacity, the less resources we will have to put into other endeavors. So the health and performance question really becomes, how much is enough for me based on my blank goal? If my goal is to run a marathon or ruck continuously for 48 hours, what are the health and performance capabilities that are necessary for me to do so with the highest likelihood of success? So when we discuss performance, oftentimes what we're trying to do is we're describing our ability to create desirable physical outputs. So some desirable physical outputs could take the form of maximal strength, as seen with, say, a heavy squat, bench, or deadlift, or really anything that we're exerting force against resistance. But we also must keep in mind explosive strength, or power, which is seen with ballistic movements, throwing, jumping, sprinting, things of that nature. We must also consider the sport and technical side of things. As many of us know, the efficiency and coordination of our movements is often the differentiating factor between winning and losing, or at least outdoing our past performances. And lastly, we must remember that robust and efficient aerobic and anaerobic fitness capabilities underlay our ability to perform all prolonged and repeated physical efforts. So the key point here, health and performance are interrelated, but they're not quite the same. Elite level performance will assume the assumption of certain health risks, most often orthopedic in nature. Elite health implies a delicate balancing act of multiple capabilities: strength, endurance, power, having diversified training methods across different modes and different durations, all in the path to becoming a better jack of all trades. Elite health implies the willingness to forgo being the best at something. Elite performance implies the willingness to sacrifice other things in the hopes of mastering one very important thing. But there is no one-size-fits-all. Health is all about bringing up the floor and creating a stable foundation to build from. Performance is all about raising the ceiling and reaching for the stars. So I tell you all of these things to make you more aware and purposeful when selecting both health and performance goals for yourselves. It is tantalizing to select only performance goals because these are the things we measure. However, it's important to balance the scales with a handful of relevant health goals as well. So think of some examples of performance goals. These could take the realm of running a sub 6-minute mile, or squatting 450 pounds, or performing 3 strict muscle-ups, right? But what about health goals? Health goals could be something as simple as having a resting heart rate less than 60 beats per minute, or averaging 8 hours of sleep per night, or even achieving a resting blood pressure less than 120/80. Lastly, we can think about lifestyle goals. So lifestyle goals can be something as simple as having less than 3 alcoholic drinks per day. Week, I hope. Or eating out no more than twice per week. Or even devoting ourselves to 15 minutes of mindfulness training or breath retraining 4 times a week, right? The intent here is to highlight the importance of not just selecting performance goals, but also choosing a handful of health goals that are relevant to your life, your aspirations, and your activity levels. Now, I do not tell you all these things to dissuade you from your performance goals. Quite the contrary. I tell you these things to empower you, to let you know what to expect on your journey and how to go about this process in a way that can best balance the scales and prevent from teetering too far over the edge of the performance precipice. Now, lastly, there is no right answer, but I want you to consider, what are the abilities and activities that you simply could not live without? Let the answer to this question shape your training. Thank you very much for your time.